What's going on, guys? Had to be back here to conclude my review and rankings of the Pokemon generations up until now. Technically, I've already reviewed Sun and Moon, but it was not a very good look at it, and without giving it much time after the game came out, I felt I was more rushed on it than what I've done so far with these kinds of videos. As well, the side story of this generation in Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon has come out, and just in general, there's a bit more I want to discuss, but first, the prologue. Due to the overall disappointment I had with Generation 6, I was keeping a cautious outlook on this game upon the reveals it's been having. Early trailers for it was showing some promise, if at the very least, the game was presenting some charm that seemed to have been missing from the last game. However, a big red flag that was appearing was the lack of new Mega Evolutions, instead replaced by these things called Z moves and, to an extent, the Alolan forms. I'll talk more later on them, but Z moves had me very concerned on a gameplay and substance level for this game. Regardless, I would eventually make it to a midnight launch of the game, one of the first I've done since probably Halo Reach. It was no Times Square or downtown Toronto midnight launch, but I got the game, and so now, without further ado, let's kick off the end with Pokemon Generation 7, Sun and Moon, and their other game, Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. So, Pokemon Sun and Moon stars you as either Sun or Moon. Great name, guys. Having just recently moved to the Alola region, all the way from Kanto. After getting an email from the resident professor, Professor Kukui, about meeting up, he goes to your home, and you both make your way up to the nearby town. In Iki Town, you find that the person that's supposed to give you a Pokemon, known as the Kahuna, isn't around. So, you decide to make your way up Mahalo Trail to look around. At the top, you spot a girl. Just after starting the game, there is a cutscene that played with this girl running away with a Pokemon from a bunch of people dressed in all white, before the Pokemon the girl was protecting teleported the two of them away. Now, the girl is here with the Pokemon, but shortly after approaching, the Pokemon runs onto the bridge ahead. Not even 5 seconds on its own, the Pokemon then gets attacked by a flock of Spearow, causing the girl to ask you for aid in saving the Pokemon, whom she calls Nebby. However, with no Pokemon in your own possession, all you're able to do is shove your way through the flock and cover the Pokemon with your body. Shortly thereafter, Nebby panics and causes an explosion, destroying the bridge, dropping you to your doom. That is until a different Pokemon swoops in and rescues the two of you, dropping you off safely before the bridge crossing. In astonishment, the girl says that was Tapu Koko, this island's guardian Pokemon, and notes a shiny stone on the ground next to you. She gives it to you for safekeeping. The girl introduces herself as Lily, and she asks to be escorted back to town. Upon reaching the town, you meet up with Kukui, who says Lily is his assistant, as well as the Kahuna Hala. After some chatting, he offers you a starter Pokemon, those being either Rowlet, Litten, or Poplio. Now, before continuing, I wasn't sure how I was going to revisit this, but I figured this may be the best way to do it. After playing through the Alolan region a few times, once with each starter, I want to revise my top favorite starters videos from over a year ago that I made. Nothing's really changing in the list, except for which spot the new ones are taking, so I'll just explain why they are where they are real fast. I said I was Team Poplio all the way when picking my first starter to play through, and I stuck to my guns on that point. What was nice about it was that it learned some pretty good moves early on. Primarina's signature move, Sparkling Aria, though, despite it being a strong move, I found I only used it for its Z move, and even then, not that much. It ends up curing status ailments on the opponent when used, so I wasn't a fan of that prospect. In terms of placing it on the list, I found it pretty hard to justify putting it really high up in my list of favorites. The nostalgic benefit of Mudkip, coupled with just the downright amazing design and usefulness of Froakie, which actually got better with Sun and Moon with the Ash Greninja form, makes it near impossible for the popular line to topple the Dual Kings. But its design alone certainly beats Oshawot's Piplups and Squirtles. I didn't say Totodile because Frankly, I do prefer their designs more, but then if we look at combat, fairy types have become quite the dominant powerhouse in the game, and with Primarina's general usefulness in battle, definitely lands it in the number 3 spot. Now onto the grass starters. Rowlet was kind of the choice that was growing more enjoyable to see as time went on. A small part of me still wished that Decidueye was still grass flying rather than grass ghost, but I put those feelings aside because, man, was this evolution line just downright fun to use and looked amazing to boot. Strong attacks coupled with decent stats too, as well as a pretty good signature move that translates to one of my favorite Z moves amongst the starters, which, as you'll find out soon, is a pretty big deal for me, really helps this line actually be my favorite starter that I use throughout my Gen 7 playthrough. So yeah, the Rowlet line topples Chikorita, Snivy, Chespin, and Bulbasaur with ease. And although I do really like the Trico line, it needed a Mega Evolution to make it better, whereas Rowlet is standing solid just on its own. That being said though, I think between the unique typing, solid design, as well as nostalgic benefit, I think the Turtwig line will hold on to its top spot, with Rowlet taking the number 2. Finally, we have the Fire Starter. Now, if we were to look at just Litten and Torracat's design, I would really like the kind of things that they were offering. Incineroar, however, is kind of a mixed package. On the one hand, they did a really good job with its animations. On the other, something just seems off with its face. Kind of reminds me of one of those creepy dolls that you'll see in scary movies with like those zipper mouths or something like that. And the fact that it also thrusts its hip at you when using special attacks kind of feels a little awkward. In terms of its attacks, I've always found it hard to justify a physical fire-type Pokemon without at least having a decent secondary typing to back it up. The Firefighters all have that benefit, with fighting-type attacks almost always having some strong moves with decent benefits to them. To me, physical fire-type moves are few and far between and just aren't all that good. Flame Wheel is weak, Fire Fang has some terrible accuracy, Blaze Kick can only be learned by certain Pokemon, and I'm not much of a fan of recoil type moves, so Flare Blitz is out of the question. I'm sure I'm missing more, but anyways. Incineroar's dark typing does help it cover its attack stat a little bit, and despite it looking the dumbest of the three, Incineroar's signature move, Darkest Lariat, is actually a pretty powerful attack. But to me, that's all that it has going for it. And there are much better dark types that you can bring to the team that aren't also weak to a number of common typings like water and ground. So that being said, the Litten family isn't even coming close to the first two. I'd use it over Fennekin for sure, but at the end of the day, I'd be more likely to pick any of the Firefighters over Litten. So with that said, Litten is going to take the number 6 spot. If you want to hear a little more detail on the other starters on the list, I'll leave a link to my top 6 Pokemon starter videos in the description, and then you could just replace what I said here and put them into their appropriate spots. Anywho, back to the main game. So you pick a starter, then Hao, the Kahuna's grandson, challenges you to a battle. Since he picks the starter weak to yours, it's an easy finish. Afterwards, the Kahuna notes the shiny stone in your possession and offers to look at it for you, promising to give it back tomorrow, and invites you to join a festival that's supposed to be taking place for new island challengers. Kukui explains how the trials for the island challenge work, and then you head back home. The next day, you participate in the festivals, battle Hao again, and receive the Z-Ring from the Kahuna, which was what the shiny stone was. The Kahuna explains that Tapu Koko must have seen some potential in you, and gives you the Island Challenge badge to go out and participate. So from there, your journey truly begins. Catch every Pokemon you see, best all the trials throughout the Island Challenge, tackle each island's Kahuna in the ultimate test of skill, discover the secrets behind Z-moves, Ultra Beasts, and how they all link towards the eccentric Team Skull and the mysterious Aether Foundation, and be the best like no one ever was. So Pokemon Sun and Moon was leagues better than X and Y by a long shot. As well, it's probably the only generation that bucked many of the usual features presented in past Pokemon games in favor of either reworking some old mechanics or introducing brand new ones. First, and probably the most prominent change, is the lack of the traditional 8 gym leaders in favor of the trials and the kahunas. There are only 4 kahunas, and they act as the usual gym leader battles everyone's used to, but trials take on a whole other purpose, for the most part. Many of the trials consist of a themed puzzle for that area, sprinkling in some battles every now and again, and concluding with a battle against a totem Pokemon. Now, these fights are interesting for a few reasons. One is that it always incorporates the new battle system featured in Sun and Moon, S.O.S battles. Rather than sending 2 Pokemon out with a 2v2 battle in mind, sometimes a single wild Pokemon you're battling will cry for help, getting back up by another Pokemon to battle you 2v1. Now, I forgot to mention Horde battles from the last generation, but I like the concept of the S.O.S battles a little more. Horde battles consisted of Pokemon that are severely underleveled, and a simple Surf or Earthquake would end the fight. Although the Trainer Horde battles in ORAS was pretty cool. But S.O.S battles is all about setting up Pokemon in a way to make them not call in backup or else deal with constant reinforcements. I find there's a higher need for strategy that the series was somewhat lacking prior. And the other reason that totem Pokemon fights are cool is that at the beginning of each totem fight, that Pokemon attains an aura that boosts stats in the process. You also can't catch Pokemon during trials, so this conceptually makes for some legitimate boss fights that Pokemon has never really seen before. And some of these fights can be tough if you don't have any knowledge of the fights beforehand, making my first playthrough quite challenging the first go around and intriguing every time after, as then I was trying my best to optimize the situation to the best of my ability. Concluding all the trials, as well as occasionally finding them scattered about the world, you can obtain Z crystals. You use these to perform Z moves, powerful attacks that branch off of pre-existing moves a Pokemon knows. This was another key feature added like what Mega Evolution was to the last generation, but here, unlike Megas, I really don't like Z moves. Firstly, the animations take way too long to perform. I could tolerate watching some of them the first few times, but after a while, considering that it's all basically just backgrounds changing rather than any meaningful animations being done, I just wish that they'd allowed a skip function, which would basically take you from performing the dance to the enemy Pokemon taking the damage from the moves. Secondly, to help mitigate that time, you might as well just use some of your other attacks. You can only perform 1 Z move per battle in Sun and Moon, so it's not like you can totally rely upon it anyways. Thirdly, and the thing that annoys me the most, Game Freak focused hard on this function since it does somewhat relate a fair bit to the story. But with them relying on this so much, they completely ignored one of the few good things that came out of Generation 6 in Mega Evolutions. There are no new Mega Evolutions whatsoever, and you're only ever able to obtain the ability to perform them by finishing the main story, which I thought was really lame. There could have been a lot of neat opportunities for this game specifically to have Megas be that cool clutch factor that you see in a lot of TV shows, but instead they have Z moves for that, and as a kind of one and done aspect that is just kind of lame. They didn't add new Megas also because they went ahead and added the Alolan form Pokemon. Alolan forms are Kanto Pokemon redone with new typings, designs, and abilities to suit their new surroundings. Some of them are pretty cool, while others are very But at the end of the day, I still kind of wish that Game Freak had instead focused on newer evolutions to older Pokemon rather than just basic palette swaps. In regards to the newer Pokemon, however, this gen did add a nice batch of new ones that I really enjoyed using, as well as a new category of Pokemon called Ultra Beasts. That's the next big change in this generation, kind of. Ultra Beasts are, in essence, still Pokemon, but their designs and mannerisms are vastly different from the more cutesy-esque style of the previous generations, but I'll get more into that a little bit later. But what's pretty sweet about catching some of these Pokemon is that now, for every Pokemon you catch, you can choose whether or not to keep them in your party right away. Oh boy, I was so glad to see that function become mainstream. It creates a sense of convenience that the game haven't really seen all that often, while simultaneously giving some actual purpose to some older Pokeballs like the Heal Ball. It's never been used ever. In order to find these Pokemon though, you get to travel through Alola, of course, and well, Despite all of the islands being quite varied, both from other islands as well as with some of the geography in of itself, Alola I found was very small. Gone are basically every town from how the previous games do it, in favor of one bigger town for each island, with smaller settlements, hotels, and Pokemon centers strewn about to compensate. Which is all well and good, but for how fast you're changing routes with different Pokemon within each place and a new set of sights to look at, it makes it hard to actually absorb what's going on around you. I don't know. Long story short, Alola felt cramped. What helped offset it a little bit though were the ride Pokemon. Gone are HM Sleighs entirely. Instead, now you have a Charizard to call upon to use Fly whenever, a Tauros and Sharpedo for rock smashes on land and sea, a Stoutland as an item finder, and many more. Their presence in this game really shows that forcefully making players choose which HMs to use wasn't as much of a death sentence as I think Game Freak meant it to be. From allowing you to forget moves, to having the moves at least be pretty good, to allowing TMs to have multiple uses, and being able to remember older attacks so you don't feel like wasting moves, to pretty much excluding HMs altogether. And I mean, really, who doesn't want to get carried around by a Machamp? Another neat feature to help connect with your Pokemon is the Pokepelago. With this, Pokemon you collect in your box can interact with a variety of different islands that all function differently. One island, you can send Pokemon deep into a cavern to hunt for useful gems and stones. Another, you can improve their happiness by sending them into the hot springs. The thing you'll be checking the most, though, is the main island where there is a large beanstalk residing there. By tapping on it, Pokebeans fall out for you to collect. These things serve a dual function of being currency to improve each island's effectiveness in what they do, that and also by how many Pokemon you have in the box, making collecting very important in this game, more so than any other. Pokebeans also are used in Pokemon Refresh, basically Pokemon Ami, but altered slightly. After some battles, a little icon will appear to take you to Refresh. Here you can feed and groom your Pokemon to raise their affection, just like in Generation 6. It's very simple stuff like blow drying your Pokemon if they're wet or getting tangles or dirt out of their hair, but another thing added is medicine. If your Pokemon gets a status ailment like poison in Refresh, you can bring out the medicine tool and completely cure your Pokemon out of battle free of charge and without using any items. I wouldn't say that is broken per se. I think Pokemon being able to snap out of ailments mid-battle is still broken, although this go around it feels like it happens a lot less. And actually doing something to help cure your Pokemon that isn't just menu prompts does kind of cheer me up a little bit once they are all cured. The only thing is that it makes money and items a much less important thing to have, though it is still needed so it's not like it ruins it entirely. And finally, the experience share as it was introduced last generation was brought back, but I find that they scaled the fights pretty well to what you should be at the time that you are reaching each new area, so it's fine. But I mean, dang, that's a large mouthful talking about just how this game plays. Let's sidetrack a little bit and let's talk about the story and characters involved with this journey, starting with the one character I dislike. I really do not like Hao. I'm sorry to anyone who does. To be fair, I still think he's better than Generation 3's rivals. But for the most part, I found him to be a very inconsequential character to the plot. His shtick is that he wants to grow up and be a kahuna like his grandfather. In order to get better, he trains himself on you, despite you two only meeting like mere minutes into the game for the first time. Since then, he's been your self-proclaimed friend and proceeds to annoy you with battles all throughout the game and eat malasadas like all the time. That certainly is a character, but what really lowers him on the tier list of rivals is two things. He picks a starter weak to yours, instantly making him much less of a threat than any other rival not named Shauna, but also, his overall personality just irks me. The boy is hyperactive not unlike Barry was in Generation 4, but the bigger difference is that Hao always has a goofy grin on his face nearly as much as the player character does. The only time he doesn't smile is when something super serious happens, but despite him saying he's learned from the experience, I feel like it's not really truly the case. The boy is also extremely dense, hardly ever cluing into the things surrounding him at any given point in time. He also somewhat disappears near the tail end of the main story, partially contradicting his constant need to be equal with you at all times. That was the bad. Now on to the great. Firstly, let's talk Team Skull, because my goodness are these guys awesome. Not just the heads too, but these are hands down my favorite grunts in the entire series. Every single one of them has this charm to them that just make me so excited to see them. And that's just it. I want to keep interacting with them. Their motivation is that I should be fearing them, but with the things they say and the hijinks that ensue around them, it makes it ironically funny to be around them, and I enjoyed every minute of them, more so since I wasn't sure what to make of them at first glance. One of my favorite moments with them comes after one of your first encounters with a pair of grunts. Besides the fact that they call each other by their letters in the text box, you face off against them in Howley City. Later on, when you're trying to finish your first trial at the Verdant Cavern, those same grunts approach you, asking if you remember them. Me, being a smartass, I went ahead and picked no, just for the game to think one step ahead of me. They go, oh, whoops, and swap places, stating that it was their bad because they were standing in different positions last time, despite them looking exactly the same. I always get a good chuckle out of that scene, and there are many more where that come from. But as I said, it's not just the grunts that stand out. The leader Guzma and their captains Plumeria and Gladian also stand out. Gladian serves kind of a different purpose that I'll get into a second though, however. In previous generations, not counting the first one, each team had a special captain-based members that the grunts look up to, ranging from around 2 members to holy moly, like 10 billion of them. But here, especially if you don't count Gladian, Plumeria trumps nearly every other captain member in the entire series. She's a no-nonsense kind of person who dishes out tough love to her grunts. They all look up to her as much as she loves looking out for them, however, and by that, it makes her a rather endearing character to interact with. What's even cooler though is that despite her technically not being the head honcho, she still acts independently and with some decent authority all on her own. She also has a really neat design to help her stand out even further. Then we got your boy Guzma, the guy that'll beat you down over and over, and oh boy, I wouldn't say he's my favorite team leader, but he definitely stands out for a different reason than the other ones. While every other team leader has this intense atmosphere stemming from their need to conquer the world, Guzma's here is just to stir up trouble. He runs the citizens of Po Town out of their homes, transforming it into the Skull's home turf, and actively tries to disrupt or completely ruin island challengers, purely as revenge for not being able to completely finish his own island challenge. But that's not the only reason, and that's where Lusamine, Gladian, Lily, and the rest of the Aether Foundation come into play. Sometime before the events of this game, Lusamine's husband, Gladian and Lily's father, was abducted and taken away through an ultra wormhole by an ultra beast, systematically declaring him dead by the populace. This snaps Lusamine's mind and drives her to be overly loving and protective towards the things she cares for, even if they feel uncomfortable with it, and using her industry and the Aether Foundation as a front to do research on ultra wormholes and ultra beasts in some vain attempt to get her husband back. Gladian and Lily both take notice of this problem, however, causing Gladian to steal one of the last remaining type nulls, genetically engineered Pokemon developed as ultra beast killers, and run away with it, and causing Lily to steal the Cosmog, later known as Nebby, and attempt to run away, but then to have Nebby teleport them away. Now, before I go too far into this, let's discuss the rumors circulating the Aether Foundation before the game came out. I was reading a lot of stuff stating that the Ultra Beasts were in fact members of the Aether Foundation, and you know what? I would go as far as to say that there's lots of reasons for that assumption, solely based on designs alone for the most of them. People were thinking Lily was Nihilego because of her hat and Nihilego's hat-like top. Lusamine was Pheromosa, since they both have extremely long legs and hair. Gladian was a bit of a stretch, but people were thinking that he was Buzzwole, since they both exuded a physical mentality, and there was at least similar colors. After that, your guess is as good as mine as to who is what. I don't know what story they could have weaved with that idea, although I think what we got wasn't that bad. Now, with all that said, I really like Gladian, but what is wrong with your hand? He's constantly holding it up and then nearly slapping himself in the face, almost like John C. But hand aside, yes, Gladion is an intriguing character. Dare I say, I think he makes a better rival character than Hao does. At least by the end of the game, he equips his Zavali with the disc that makes its typing stronger to you. As a person, he joins Team Skull in a vain attempt to find a place to belong, while also keeping an eye on the Ether Foundation and Lily, but finds himself quickly shunned by his Team Skull comrades, outcasting himself further. He ultimately means well, but is a little too hard-headed to see otherwise. He gets annoyed at Hao for having such a positive demeanor despite Hao just losing to him. They attempt to argue their ideologies all throughout, with Hao basically spouting silliness about always having fun and Gladion with some brooding reasoning for his side. Next is Lily, and by extension, Nebby. Not too often do we have a Pokemon in the main series of games that's also an actual character. You could argue that Lucario you get in Generation 6 was, or maybe a few legendaries, but Nebby is something else entirely. Nebby is energetic and excitable, always running out of its bag to get into the middle of all the excitement around it. Lily, thusly, acts as his mother figure, but one not quite ready to undertake the role at first, only reacting to save Nebby because it was in trouble, but slowly gains more and more confidence along the way, culminating in a unique intermission segment where Lily gives herself up to Team Skull to protect a group of kids at the Ether House. After you, Hao, and Gladion storm the Ether Paradise to rescue her, you confront Lusamine in her quarters, with Lily there happy to see that you've come to rescue her. Lusamine unveils her plan to use Nebby's power to open an ultra wormhole to enter into their world in an attempt to save/get revenge for her husband. She also explains how her ultimate goal is to spread her love to everything that deserves and wants the love, despite having a room with Pokemon basically trapped in carbonite. The kids all plead with her to see and hear reason, to which Lusamine basically disowns her children outright, stating that they don't want her love, so whatever. She then shocks Nebby, forcing it to open a wormhole that she and Guzma, who have been hired on by the Ether Foundation as a decoy of sorts, to jump through the portal before it closes. The process, though, forces Nebby to evolve into a Cosmoem, practically putting it into a coma-like state. All this puts a toll on Lily, but she doesn't let the scenario hold her down, instead putting on a new outfit, to which she declares she will be participating on her own island challenge to learn to be useful and to save Nebby and her mother in her own way, accompanied by her own Z-move that she messes up, but in the most adorable of ways. This whole intermission segment I found was a really interesting sequence. Personal stakes are raised, and the story quickly diverts from not just about stopping the bad guy and being the best like no one ever was, but to also help your best friends save their family, not just from having them destroy the world, but also save them from themselves. It was at this point that Lily became the best supporting character the Pokemon series has ever seen. Not that there have been much in the way of competition in that regard. Unlike the vast majority of your rivals in previous games, your friendship with Lily isn't implied. You meet her for the first time in this game, and you build a strong relationship with her, centered mostly around Nebby and finding the secrets behind it, but when things start to get rough with her family, I genuinely care for the girl's well-being, and I want to help her see her own mission through, not just to have her back me up for my mission. There's also subtle hints towards her having developed some romantic feelings towards you. Not with that scene, you pervs! But if that's the case, this would be the Pokemon's first attempt at shipping the player character with another person. Pretty progressive as well, since it can happen to both genders. So the game takes you for a ride through the final island, you beat the final kahuna, travel through Pony Canyon, and beat the final trial, reaching the altar of Sun or Moon. You and Lily play the special flutes that awaken the power there, which beams itself onto Nebby, restoring its power, evolving it into your game's poster legendary. Lily asks Nebby for its help to rescue her mother, and Nebby opens up an ultra wormhole and takes you guys through it. And here, in Ultra Space, is where we see the place of existence for Ultra Beasts, or in this case at least for a bunch of Nihilegos. I've not quite gone into much depth, but really, there's not much more that needs to be said after seeing this part of the game. These creatures are abnormal beings that I'm sure want to exist on their own part, but in our eyes, make you have this feeling of unease as you walk around this space with a bunch of Nihilegos just creepily watching you. You find Guzma and he comments on how this wasn't quite what he signed up for. At the end, you see Lusamine sitting next to a bunch of Nihilegos. Lily tries to reason with her, but to no avail. In her own warped mind, this place has become a new home for her, and she intends on protecting all that she loves by any means necessary. To that end, she morphs with a Nihilego, becoming this crazy-looking abomination, and then she battles you. The reasoning behind the need for a battle kinda makes me chuckle, but this is nonetheless an intense sequence against the morphed Lusamine. All of her Pokemon attain an aura tainted by the power of the Ultra Beasts, and oh my god, look at them all. They all look so angry. Worse even that they're all cutesy Pokemon. That's both super funny and actually somewhat unsettling to see what Ultra Beasts could do to someone's Pokemon as well as themselves. So after a tough battle, the Nihilego releases Lusamine, allowing you, Lily, and Guzma to take her back to the real world. Back home, Lusamine still appears unresponsive, and Hapu, Pony Island's new kahuna, offers to take Lusamine back. There, Lily thanks Nebby for all its help. They bicker for a moment afterwards, since Nebby wants to travel with Lily, but she's afraid that she won't be an appropriate parent to take care of it, but instead tells you to take care of it, and show it what it means to be a true parent. So you catch either Solgaleo or Lunala, not fainting it because you're not a monster, and of course you name it Nebby because why else wouldn't you? And there's a touching scene where Lily basically goes through the motions of telling Nebby to behave itself with me in such a motherly fashion, and I just find it just so adorable. Sorry, this thing's gone on long enough, but like Generation 5, I just need to explain the key points of these moments and just how special they are. I like games with well-written stories, even if the game is part of a series of a mostly copy-pasted type of games. But Generation 7 doesn't quite do the same thing in most parts, and I think it's all the better for it. But at that point, you're off to finish the game. Kukui mentioned how he's going to build his own Pokemon League, taking inspiration from the other regions that have them, and since you've completed the Island Challenge, you can now take them on. Climbing the highest point of Alola, Mount Lanakila, you take on the newly implemented Elite Four, with some familiar faces and some not so familiar. You beat them and then congrats, you've become the first ever champion of the Alola region. However, upon sitting the throne, Kukui decides to take you on, not to take over the place, since he has no interest in doing so, but to make the experience a little more genuine for you. He's a pretty tough fight too, but eventually you'll beat him. Credits will roll with a post-credit sequence where everyone parties and celebrates the new champ, with Lily taking you aside to take you to Tapu Koko's shrine to go pray to it. Then it appears to you, which you can then battle it and capture it potentially. There's a scene further after that which shows how rushing to your house because Lily's leaving. Confused, you rush to the port to find her waiting with her mother to go. She explains how she read about a man in Kanto who once merged with a Pokemon and wants to take Lusamine there for a checkup. Begrudgingly, she departs with her, leaving you without your best friend. So you saved the world, a family too, and been crowned the first ever champion of Alola. Now what? Well, there's a post-game story starring Looker once again, as well as his boss Annabelle, as you track down and try to catch a set number of certain Ultra Beasts for studying, uncovering even more secrets along the way. As the first ever champion of Alola, you can go back and refight the Elite Four for kicks, but when you ascend to the Champion's Chamber, your opponent will be randomly picked each time you go, making refights actually quite interesting. There's also a new section of Pony Island that's available for you to access now, gaining the ability to perform Mega Evolutions just before heading in. In this new area, though, you fight some tough trainers, and at the end of it, you reach the Battle Tree. But before partaking, you have a run-in with a much older-looking Red and Blue from the first two games. They're there on vacation, Blue says, and he offers you the chance to battle one of them, with Red silently looking on, of course. It's played more for laughs this time around, but it's still pretty cool to see regardless. After that, you get full access to the Battle Tree, this game's Battle Tower. I haven't played around with it too much though, to be honest, but as far as I'm aware, the shtick with this version is the fact that you can battle against and even recruit a variety of trainers, including a wide array of legacy characters. I like the idea of it, I just haven't sat down to really dedicate myself to the tower. And besides Lily's diary being open for you to read back at Kukui's lab, that's pretty much it. That sure was a mouthful, but that wouldn't be the end of Generation 7, or the Alola region for that matter, because a few months after the launch of Sun and Moon, we get confirmation of the new games in the series in Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. My first impressions were somewhat mixed. Nintendo was pretty vague about the details, but through the first few peeks of it, I thought the game was going to act more along the lines of what Black 2, White 2 did for Generation 5. However, upon further reveals, the game ultimately became more akin to what Platinum was for Generation 4. To that end, I'll try, keyword try, to go over just the changes real quick. So changes to Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon are 1. Different opening sequence. You meet your starter before meeting Lily and Nebby, causing the scenario itself to be different since you battle a Spearow at the bridge, and yet the cutscene still plays out normally after that with you covering Nebby with your body. I think it was kind of dumb and they could have did something different. 2. Trials got a revamp of sorts. At worst, they remain status quo. At best, they got the slightest bit more taxing on the brain, and one new one even got added, which was nice. 3. The Rotom Dex. You can be buddies with your Rotom Dex and take photos. Got real dumb and real annoying real fast, since if he starts talking to you, you can't access the map. He also dispenses items to you and other perks that I felt bogged down the pace of the game and the difficulty. 4. The Ultra Recon Squad. 4 different members being added with you interacting with 2 of them throughout the majority of your story. They are unique, but I think that's really as far as it goes. They're there as part of the reworked plot and to introduce the new Ultra Beasts to the game. 5. Mantine Surfing. Instead of taking a boat between most of the islands, you can partake in a new minigame where you ride a Mantine. It's a lot less fun than they try to make it out to be. Number 6. Necrozma taking the spotlight. The story mostly centers around Necrozma and how it's threatening to steal the light away from Alola. It's not as interesting a story bit as the original, but it's fine, it's whatever. Number 7. Ultra Wormhole Travel. At the climax of the game, you're able to ride either Solgaleo or Lunala and travel through the Ultra Wormhole. The gyro controls suck when you first do it, so as soon as you're able to, get it changed to using the pad. Other than that, it's fine. It's a unique way of capturing some of the unique legendaries from older games. Number 8. Ultra Megaopolis. I'm gonna say the same thing about this as I said about the Distortion World in Generation 4. A boring visual spectacle. Besides your encounter with the true form Necrozma, you don't really get to do anything here. It's implied that people live here, but besides the opposite Ultra Recon Squad pairing, you don't see anybody. Number 9. True form Necrozma. This fight is awesome. Basically a tougher totem fight without the S.O.S. part of it. I found myself actually taxing myself to try and overcome this fight. It was actually pretty sweet. Number 10. Different post-game storyline. This game doesn't have Looker's story, but rather the invasion of Team Rainbow Rocket. A pretty neat idea for the most part, but I find that the originals was just as neat without trying to use nostalgia to enhance the excitement. Now that sounds like a lot, and yeah, it is, but besides a few nitpicky things on that I had issues with, there was one aspect that got changed that made me lose my mind. To quickly recap the story, basically, Necrozma threatens to take the light away from Alola. Meanwhile, the events of the original game transpire pretty much word for word, besides the inclusion of the Ultra Recon Squad. Then you get to the intense intermission sequence like the base game. You encounter Lusamine, and well, how do I put this Lusamine sucks in this continuity. I mean, my god. Sure, she mentions her husband very briefly during her monologue, but then she drops the biggest bombshell of this game, and that the only reason she wants to fight Necrozma and the Ultra Beast is to gain glory and fame. Ugh, really? What was so neat about the original Lusamine was that she was a person who had just lost her husband and was trying to cope by being overly loving to those around her, ironically driving them further away. Because of that, her mind just continues to go further mad, with now using her position of power to basically track down these Ultra Beasts in some vain attempt to have her husband back, or to at least spread her love to creatures she's never met. Here, though, we get one of the most generic villain motivations ever. I want to be famous, so I'll use my famous company to find a way to confront Necrozma, so I'll be super duper famous. It's so lame compared to the Lusamine we got a year prior to this. And that lack of dedication extends to Lily and Nebby as well. They too feel a lot less significant towards the plot and world, since now, with Lusamine not getting possessed in this continuity, Lily sticks around in Alola, but just as a doting daughter rather than taking up the role as her mother's caretaker, which I found to be the more intriguing conclusion to her story. Gladian remains pretty much the same. Hao is still stupid. Really, the only person that had a positive change was Guzma, and that's only to the extent that they involved him a little more in the main and post-game story. It's hard, guys, really, because I enjoyed Sun and Moon so much, and then went into Ultra Sun and Moon with such high expectations and had them just crushed upon impact. I could deal with the dumbed down story, the boring rival character. Every version has fantastic music, so that I won't let that change anything. And all the disconnects between what your character does compared to what's happening in the story. But to butcher some of this series' most interesting characters just felt like a huge gut punch. But regardless, I gotta place them on the list somewhere, so let's just dissect this quickly. Generation 7 is definitely better than Generation 3 and 6. It does not eclipse Generation 2, 5, nor 4, although I think if we were to just look at Sun and Moon, I think the story would be better than 4. So that leaves me with picking either above or below the generation that Alola likes to reference so much, Generation 1. I think if I was looking just at Sun and Moon, it would be easily above Generation 1, and for as much flack as I have for Ultra, I think it retains at least the core gameplay, world exploration, and characters for the most part. So, yeah. I'd say that Generation 7 will take the number 4 spot just above Generation 1. So, yeah, there you go. My personal list of favorite Pokemon generations, at least until the next one comes out. Let me know what you guys think, and make sure you watch the other generation videos to get my full opinion on everything involved. But anywho, sorry this one got wordy. There was just so much that culminated into this big title that I wanted to bring up. I'm sure I still missed stuff, but anyways, at the end of the day, I had a lot of fun working on these videos, so let's keep this fun going. Here's a little taste to my next series of games I'm going to take a look at, not counting Fire Emblem, next time we meet.
Show us light from now. Show us sight for where we can go. And forgive with no guiding light. Do you know where is to go? Don't just follow. We can try. 'Cause we're living now.
We're going to stick with Nintendo for a little while longer, and we're going to take a look at the Xenoblade Chronicles series next time. But until then, I'll see you all later. Thanks for watching.